Welcome to the Stephen Sayoun podcast. How long have you been doing BJJ?
7 years. So I was turning 31 and I turned 38 like 2 months ago. So just over 7 years.
Right, so you're just a little bit older than me, and you've got a small family.
I do. I got a 5-year-old
Oh, nice.
from a girl that I met in the tail end of being in Japan. That's
Oh
the whole
no.
story. And then
Uh,
I have my wife who she's American. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And
Yeah.
when did you move to the States?
So basically, I did my 2-year contract in Japan. Well, 2 seasons, so it wasn't a full 2 years. But I think let me think. I left Tokyo on the Monday in January of 2018. I
Mm-hmm.
touched down in England on the Tuesday. I went straight on the piss on Wednesday. I recovered Thursday, Friday, and I was on the plane to go to America on Saturday. And I was at work on Monday. Yeah,
Shit. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
when you say work on Monday, what job are we talking about? Like, did you just get a contract or something as a head S&C
No,
coach?
the visa that I was on, I had to have work when I went over there. So that this was at the University of Richmond. So I effectively started again completely at the bottom. So there was a variety of reasons why I did it. You know, I have Jada Mayo who runs Central Virginia Sports Performance, good
Yeah,
friend of
yeah.
mine. I'd been going to that seminar in 2012, and Japan was such a political shit show to work in that I told my agent halfway through the deal, I was like, do not renegotiate this deal. And I kind of had a little bit of fallout after the World Cup in 2015. And I kind of thought, well, what do I want to do? What is there left to do? Because, Argentina are not going to win the World Cup in my career. Not going to work for England, not going to work for Australia, not going to work for New Zealand or South Africa. Like, really, there's no countries that I'm going to be able to have another crack at. So I kind of took the money and went to Tokyo. And yeah, it was nice to have the money. It was nice to work with the athletes that I did. It was nice to experience another country, but I just completely burnt out of rugby. And I'd kind of persuaded myself at the time, well, if I go to work in the NFL, everyone will have to respect me and, accept how good of a coach I am. And, I've middle finger to everyone and stuff like that. So it was that. And just starting again at the bottom, it was actually pretty refreshing change for me to not have a single meeting and have nobody bother me and stuff like that. Like I was the bottom assistant. So they paid me $14,000 a year. I was in the
Fuck.
luxurious position of being able to do it because I had,
Yeah.
a salary coming in from Strength Coach Network and all that stuff, and I had a lot of money saved up from Japan.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a bunch of factors that went into it. But yeah, I started completely again at the bottom with a view to
So,
trying to get into the NFL.
and are you still doing that now?
No. So I alluded to my son. So my son's mother, I hated Japan. And 6 weeks before I left, I met my son's mother, and she came over for a week in, let me think, March 2018, and he just turned 5. So,
Oh, nice.
we spent, we actually had him over here. We were together for a little bit over here, but it was, we're separated now. So by the time that had rolled around when he was born, so I didn't have any health insurance. So I was like, man, I heard having babies is expensive in America. So I knew that was coming up. I presented at Central Virginia Sports Performance, and you might know him. His name's Eric Corum, big guy in the
Mm-hmm.
NFL, college football, has since left to go into develop an app, a performance app. He was one of the few handful of guys that I was like, I could work for this guy. And he saw me present and said, do you want to come to William and Mary? And they had health insurance. I get to work for Eric Corum, double my salary plus, all that kind of stuff. So I did that for 2 seasons. And basically
Mm-hmm.
what happened was me and my son's mother separated about when he was a year old. And
Yeah.
then it's I'm sure you know how busy the schedules are in like the NRL, the AFL, all that kind of stuff. College football is like that on steroids. It's literally 7 days a
Oh, I
week.
could imagine.
Yeah. So I flew
Yeah.
my, let me think. We had the court case on the Tuesday. She handed him over to me on the Tuesday night.
Oh,
Went to
fuck.
Japan. I took
Mm.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off work. My mother arrived on the Saturday. I was back at work on the Monday. And for 2.5 months, 7 days a week, I would get up at 5. I would drop him off at daycare, work a full day, pick him up, drive home, and just do that until he went back to Japan. And I dropped him off in January of 2020, and he was supposed to come back for a court date. And of course, what happened in spring of 2020? So I didn't see him for a year.
Oh,
And
mate.
basically, it got to December of 2020 when he was coming back.
Mm.
I knew that he would probably be coming back then. And it
Mm.
got to September, October, we start coming back into work, and it was absolutely miserable. So my boss, Eric, left. My assistant went to Arizona. None of
Oh,
those staff got replaced. And they put a cap in the gym of one person per rack. So for some reason, they had this like Nazi scheduling the days. I was on the floor 12 hours a day. And I just thought, right, is there
fuck
any way
this.
that I'm going to be a presence in my son's life
Mm.
balancing these kind of demands? And I was like, nope. So I was like, right, good coach, good parent. If you said to me, "We get to work in the NFL, but it's going to come at the expense of being around your son," easy decision. So I left full time coaching in October of 2020, and I basically during COVID, Strength Coach Network had I think it almost tripled that year. Like I made way more from Strength Coach Network than I made from my salary, and I was like, why would I commute 100 miles a day and eat shit and all this kind of stuff when I could just be growing
Mm.
the site? So that's what I did, and I grew it until when did I sell? September of this year. So just under 3 years. Sold up Strength Coach Network, and now focusing on the business stuff.
Man, that would be pretty tough, eh? Like being like a single dad for like a year and trying to work full time, and he's only
Yeah,
one and he's going from country to country, and I mean
yeah,
that would be hard on him. And you know, I'm a dad as well. My son's 3.5 now,
yeah,
and I struggle with that. I have that power struggle with my business and trying to be a good dad as well. And I feel guilty every time I'm working in front of him and stuff like that. But to go
yeah.
through what you went through would be mentally draining, and I guess you're never going to put, I guess, business in front of your kids, but you say that and then you can easily get caught into this whirlwind
Hmm.
of being a workaholic where
Yeah,
you kind of sit back and go, what the fuck am I doing all this for when I've got this little person that needs me and I can't actually be present in their lives because
mm,
I'm so fixated on how many programs I sell in a week or something like that, and it's
yeah.
just, it would be shit. So now, at the moment, is your son back with you now full time?
No, so right now we split. We split 5 months on, 5 months off. So coming up to the tail end of him
Right.
being here with me. Yeah.
And obviously, how does he like that? Is he used to that now and things like that, I guess?
I mean, he's never known anything else. Like before he was able
Yeah.
to form memories, he was going back and forth between here and Tokyo. It's a lot of travel for a 4 or 5 year old.
Yeah,
I think I'll
definitely.
probably estimate he's been on like 30 flights already. So
Fuck.
it's
Poor,
yeah, it's
poor little
it's
guy.
it's it's a lot. But then he also doesn't know anything else. And then I think with kids, it's always like you have to try and reframe for them. So he's seen more of the
Hmm.
world than a lot of adult Americans. And he's going to speak 2 languages, and he's going to have all these experiences and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
there are benefits if you look for them.
Hmm. Definitely. Now, at the moment, obviously, it sounded like a bit of a shit show with the NFL and everything like that. Um, Moving on from Strength Coach Network, you were focusing on your online business. At the
Mm.
moment now, are you still working on that business, or have you transitioned into more of a business mentorship side of things from what I'm seeing on social media?
I mean, I completely stepped away from Strength Coach Network. I mean, let me think. So I think, yeah, a bunch of things came together where one of the reasons why I got out of full time coaching was when I was doing it, I just realized like I hate this. Like I have no passion for this anymore. And I think really that I did get burnt out after the 2015 World Cup. but all I did was I just kept changing the wrapper or, something to distract me. Like, oh, I'm in Japan and I get to work with like all these All Blacks. And then, oh, I'm in America and I'm
Mm.
chasing the NFL. But once the shine wore off from that, really in 2020, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And not as severely, but I think the same thing kind of happened after 3 years of really like trying to work hard on Strength Coach Network, and then I got engaged and married summer of 22, so that kind of took up my time, and I delegated a bit to my staff, and then I just delegated a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more,
Mm.
and then I didn't really do anything last December. We had a record month last December. We did 86 grand, and I barely did anything but promote the site. And I was like, right, I'm just gonna fucking step away, period. And I didn't
Mm.
really do anything from January of last year. And Justin, who now runs the site,
Yeah.
he had been, we'd kind of like progressively phased him in. That's one thing that I have learned is like you have to phase people in. And he's like, I want to do more. I want to do more. I want to do more. And then he got fired from his gig. And he's like, is there any way that you can pay me more? And I was like, have I got something for you? So we just basically wrote up an agreement where, he was going to buy Strength Coach Network. And man, it probably took 2 to 3 months to get it to a point where we could hand him the keys and he
Yep.
could do well and start making money from it. And he's done very well with it. So really, since then, I tried to take most of October off, failed. Probably got like 2-3 weeks in before I started working on stuff. And since then I've just been kind of foot to the floor on call me Kier. That's like it's kind of a running joke, which is, when I worked in rugby, I was the rugby strength coach. And then I went to work in American football and he's like, oh, the rugby guy. So I was like, right,
Mm.
no more rugby guy, no more strength coach network. I was like, call me Keir. So that's the website that I'm promoting the course from. And that's where my focus is right now.
Nice, man. Now, I'm going to delve into a bit more like of the coaching side of things. What Obviously, what were the nuances and the differences between working with rugby versus NFL? Did you find that obviously it's two different sports, but
Yeah.
did you find like the athletic standard of these Americans versus from where you're working previously within rugby, there was a big difference with their protocols and their
Yeah, yeah.
structure?
I will add the caveat. I never worked in the NFL, so I worked in college football. It's kind of like people say
Oh,
AFL when they mean Aussie rules. I don't want
yeah,
to, put this idea out there like, oh, I worked in the NFL. Like, I definitely gave up on that. I
yeah.
did consult for an NFL team for 2 days, but yeah, yeah. So I think there's a bunch of factors that, yes, there are differences and there are reasons why. One is just sheer population. There's 300 million people in this country. There are big financial incentives.
Yeah.
America is a very individualistic society. People are trying to crawl over one another to win, 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 win.
Hmm.
So there's that. I think there's aspects to the game that lend themselves to having those outputs that you don't see in rugby. So,
Hmm.
when the game is 5 seconds on, 35 seconds off, you do a 6 play drive and then you get a big rest. You can afford to be 330 pounds. Like, I would say most big colleges, a left tackle, you'll probably have to be 330 pounds, which is what, close to 170 kg. Oh, no, 100,
Fuck.
150 kg.
Yeah, 150.
So most left tackles, you basically have to be built like a
A
shot
brick
putter,
shit house.
or
Yeah.
a basketball player plus another 40 plus kilos. So that's one reason that you see guys that are that big, that strong.
Mm.
Another is you see guys that are faster. I do think that having like a big track culture in the South,
Yeah.
having a large black population to draw from, it's
Hmm.
just a fact there are racial differences in terms of speed at the thin end of the wedge. For for context, I think the fastest rugby player I ever encountered ran a 10-6 in high school. you will
Fuck.
find you will find a 10-6 kid in every college football team in America at the Division 1 level. It's
You're
just like,
kidding me.
yeah, business as usual. So I think that's one thing. When it comes to the injuries, you do tend to see different injuries, which is there's a lot more, particularly in the O line, those knee injuries, like guys getting rolled up on and knees
Yeah.
collapsing, which is why you see all the braces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Concussion, I think there's probably as big of a concussion problem in football as rugby, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
The reason we see it in rugby is some of the tackle laws and the fact that
Mm.
there's no protective equipment. The reason we see it in football is because the helmet ends up becoming a weapon. So
Yes.
I know for a fact there are Power Five colleges that I was told firsthand the way that they teach the tackle is you line up your man, you make a triangle between his head and his shoulder pads, and then you aim the top of your head at the middle of that triangle.
Oof. That's
And
savage.
even, yeah, you see guys where, for example, in rugby, you make a tackle, you're always taught ear on the butt
Mm,
so that you're not basically having your head be a road bump.
pretty
They
much.
teach the opposite. They teach head on the front side because it's just another body part to stop the run.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's
Uh, there was a good documentary I watched on Junior Seau on Netflix, and
yeah,
mate, the concussion. He actually broke his helmet, and the Yeah, obviously he was Samoan background, and Samoans here in
yeah.
Australia are known for being notoriously tough and just
They're actually
robust.
the most overrepresented ethnic background within the NFL. American
Re-
Samoans.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
okay, I didn't know that. But
yeah,
anyway, just watching the like he ended up going a bit crazy and I didn't watch the end of it, but I'm guessing I kind of knew where it went
yeah,
with the brain trauma and stuff that he
yeah,
suffered. But you do see that they lead with the head and they
yeah,
pretty much use their necks as like shock absorbers
yeah.
as they go in for those tackles. So when you were working with this NFL team and obviously were there a lot of politics surrounding
Hugely.
like much more than what you had dealt with in the past with rugby.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Just because there's a lot. Well, America, if you look at America in general,
Mm.
it's actually quite a conservative country.
Do
So
you think parts of it are though? Like
no, actually, I think most of geographically, even in the blue states, it's mostly the cities that are blue, and then you just drive an hour out of the city and it's red. So I guess if
mm,
you like lined up the number of towns that are mostly conservative,
hmm
America's mostly a conservative country. Um, but the reverse is true in college campuses. College campuses are some of the most politically like woke, backstabby. There's been a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, which is basically about wokeism on American college campuses. That's one layer you have to factor in. You have to factor in the fact that there's racism in America. So there's
mm.
another layer that goes into the decision making process and hiring and how people interact. And
Oh, man.
then you have to account for the fact that, a college scholarship is probably worth upwards of $250,000 in terms of the monetary value. So then the parents add another layer. You will have parents calling up coaches and all this kind of stuff. Then
Fuck.
there's the jockeying for position. There is the jockeying between sports. So there's that. There's also a law in America called Title IX, which is any opportunity offered to a male athlete must be balanced with the same opportunity being given to a female athlete.
Oh my god.
Then you also have things like NIL, NSCA regulations. It used to be that well, it still is, but they can get paid via different avenues. But it used to be that any uh, gift or anything given to an athlete that was not offered to an equivalent normal student is a violation and you would get banned. So there was a kid whose parents died in a car crash, and this coach took the athlete to the airport, bought him a plane ticket, and said, "Go home, sort your stuff out." They banned that athlete for a year. He lost a
Oh,
year of
that's
eligibility. Yeah, so
oh come on.
it's so rife. And I think it's a little bit simpler, certainly in Australian rugby, just because everyone's so
Mm,
it's much more of a flat hierarchy. It's not even a hierarchy. People are a lot more tell it how it is. There's a lot
mm,
more to do with winning. I think there's a little bit less that the fans have to do with how a place is run, how donors, admins, and so on run a place than
Yeah.
in college football. So for example, Texas A&M just fired Jimbo Fisher, and I want to say his payout was $70 million. So they now have to spend $70 million, but because it's a state institution, there's a cap that what you can pay. So, for example, let's say, right, your position, the maximum you can earn is $150,000 a year.
Yeah.
That means that a donor has to make up every other penny of your salary. If it's 6 million, 7 million, that donor has to pay most of that 6 million to you. So now they get a say over who gets hired, even though they don't know football. They're just a rich oil family. Just things like that. So
Uh,
Texas A&M, having fired Jimbo Fisher, were just about to announce the hiring of a new head coach. Like, I heard it was kind of like pen to paper. They've signed the contract, and there was such uproar from the fan base and the donors. They just went and hired somebody else. Can you imagine that in the
fucking
NRL?
no chance, mate. They don't have
Yeah,
the obviously not even a quarter of the money or the funding that
yeah.
the US has. But mate, yeah, that would be quite frustrating. I guess that's probably what led to kind of burnout. Well, did you feel like you just weren't challenged anymore? Like you're an
Oh, once I got to America, yeah,
yeah,
it
right.
was. I'm sorry, go on.
No, because like the audience, well, a lot of people know you in the strength and conditioning field. You are a very smart guy. You're very switched on with your skill set. And the reason why I ask this is, did you feel like you get to a stage where it's like it's not really challenging enough for me to kind of keep me wanting to perhaps refine this skill craft or this skill set, sorry, to want to pursue this? And how can I challenge myself by taking a massive pay cut and just redirecting to a whole different, excuse me, sport and country? Is that
Yeah,
kind of where you were at? And then when you
yeah,
started to deal with all the politics and bullshit behind it, you're just like, well, fuck this. Is what's the
yeah.
point?
That was a lot of it. Even within rugby, I think it's just a fact that it's almost like getting dressed. There's certain things that you have to put on first before you can put on other garments. And anytime you go into a department in a professional sports organization, there should be like it should be like a regular business. Like, for example, Ford or Apple, they have institutional or corporate knowledge. So they own the intellectual property. They have their processes, they have their systems, they have, their resources, all that kind of stuff. They have their staff in place. They know, who they want on the bus, who's going to drive it, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When key people within those organizations get fired, you just replace that person and continue as you were.
Mm.
Within sport, everybody gets fired. All the knowledge that they have leaves with them. All the systems and
Oh,
process leave with them. It basically starts over again. So
shit.
a lot of the sexy stuff, or once you've been doing it a while, the stuff that actually challenges you intellectually, you don't actually get to do until you've been in a place for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Most teams that you go to, the first year is just like, right, you have to establish good habits. You have to do the fundamentals. Year
Mm.
two is correct some of year one, introduce some new stuff. I don't really think you get cooking with a new team until you get to year three.
Yeah.
And I never got past year three. After that, it was always right, next team, next team, next team. Sometimes for good
Yes.
reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. But when you've done it 6 times, it's like, yeah.
Rinse and
And
repeat.
the exact words that I used to my boss Eric, particularly at William and Mary, was, if you ask me, how much am I operating at 10? I'm probably at about a 2 right now on a technical level. I said, if you ask me to describe what I'm operating at on a political level, I'm probably at an 11 right now. Yeah,
Which is a shame, right? Because someone to come in with such a big skill set and to not be able to utilize it and express it to the highest of your ability would be
yeah.
frustrating. It'd be just like training for a football game that you never get to play, which
Mm,
is kind of shit. Has anyone ever told you look like Ryan Gosling?
all the time.
Mate, if I was you, I would be knocking on fucking Hollywood's door trying to get a fucking stunt
Oh
double
my
role.
god, yeah. Nah, like dude, I used to get it going through passport control in Buenos Aires.
Really?
Yeah, my nickname in the team was Noah. Yeah.
Oh Oh god.
And
Mate.
my barber in Japan, he like sent me a picture once on Instagram. He's like, Lion Gozuin. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a crack up. No, but mate, look, obviously it's a good right now with what you're doing now. You're in the business scene, side of things. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you're actually running and how that's going for you at the moment?
Yeah. Well, with everything in Strength Coach Network, I kind of the writing on the wall for me was when I went to Central Virginia Sports Performance. It was at like the 10-year anniversary of when I'd first gone. So it's 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And, I went for the 2 days, and my wife had mentioned to me, she's like, oh, did you notice that every presenter that weekend mentioned you and Strength Coach Network by name? And I was like, no. And it didn't really bother me that much. And I went to buy some training books from Joseph Johnson, Ultimate Athlete Concepts. Very
Mm-hmm.
good. And friendly with him, and he gives me like another 3 books free on top. So I leave with a stack of books like this. And a month later, I looked and I hadn't touched the books. And I thought, oh, this is like I just clearly just run out of gas. For example, I've watched. I've watched 2 rugby games in since 2018. One in person, one on the TV by accident. That's it. So it's kind of the same thing with regard to the nuts and bolts of strength and conditioning and sport preparation, stuff like that. And really, I was more interested in the business side of things because that had been my focus for 3 years. Um, Coupled with the fact that whenever people signed up to Strength Coach Network, we would interview them on the front end and we would interview them on the back end when they cancelled. So every new customer that would come in, new coach, we'd say, right, if we had a magic wand that we could wave for you, what would the result be? And they'd say a higher paying job and a higher status job.
Mm.
And then when they cancelled, we get a lot of, I can't afford it. I'm like broke, that's the reality of the bottom levels of our field.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of thinking about those two things, how do you get a higher status job?
Mm.
Yes, education goes into it, but a lot of the time it's because you know the right person, which we do provide resources, education, and stuff like that. But then a lot of the time as well, it's just because you were around the longest. After that next guy, that guy leaves or dies or gets fired, and you bump up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which we can't do much about. And the fact is that your earnings tend to be tied to the position that you occupy in the hierarchy. And it's also
Mm-hmm.
a fact that it's very, very rare for you to jump from number 5 to number 2. It's
Mm.
normally going to be you go from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, unless you're willing to really move around with teams. Another reality is that there's this oversubscription. There are more coaches out there looking for jobs, so supply exceeds demand, which means that there's downward pressure in terms of wages. Anytime you have more supply than demand, the price goes down. So trying to enter a system that you don't have the ability to manipulate to your favor, really,
Mm-hmm.
and the wages are going down anyway, it's very, very tough to solve those two problems going through that traditional pathway. So I thought, well, all I do is still speak to strength coaches all day long. I'm still involved in training. I have this relationship with the strength coach community and that knowledge. Why don't I put something out to teach them how to make money on the side for themselves? Because rather than wait 5 years for the guy above you to leave or get fired,
Yeah.
you can start tomorrow working for yourself. As you can go out and sell something to someone and make some money, and ultimately the results that you achieve is going to be proportional to the work that you put into it and how effective you are at implementing what you learn. And that's a lot truer than it is within traditional team sport coaching.
Yeah. Definitely. So, what service is it that you're actually offering? Is it like a business mentorship with
It's just a course. Yeah.
just a
So
course?
yeah, I launched it in, let me think, March of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Ran it once ran it through again in the summer, and I made some tweaks the first time, but I've made some real big changes this time.
Yeah.
So the lead magnet that I used for it was basically telling the entire story, how I started working for myself in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through up until selling Strength Coach Network in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like how I grossed over $1 million working on the side whilst working as a strength coach. When it came to the first two iterations of the course, because of that presentation, I was like, right, I need to tell them how to do everything. So I laid out everything in the business, and I struggled to fit it in over 10 modules. And the feedback I got was that it's almost like trying to drink from a fire hose. Like if you've never worked for yourself before or tried to sell something online, someone's talking to you about like, oh, track links and paid growth and CRMs and automated
Oh
email
man.
marketing, stuff like that's too much. So I just pared it right down and simplified it way down. So now I'm partnering with Train Heroic, and the value
Wow.
proposition is $1,000 in 8 weeks or less using nothing but Train Heroic and your own social media. So that gets rid of the need to have a CRM,
I use
understand
Trainer
how
Oaks.
to write, email marketing and stuff like that. It's like literally the bare bones. Here's how you make $1,000. And if you repeat that 5 times in a year, that's 5K in your pocket. And that is, I would say comfortably, that's a lot more than most coaches have ever made online in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do the membership in level 2. Yeah.
Mate, that's a good way. That's great because I could never wrap my head around the marketing side of things. And I was
Mm,
like, I just don't have the time to do it, to sit there and try and teach myself the logistics behind it. And then I tried hiring someone for marketing, and they wanted to charge me, between $5,000 and $10,000 to be able
it's expensive.
to actually run a marketing campaign for myself. And when I actually sat down there and I looked at it, and I spoke to other coaches in the industry, coaches who we both know, and they said to me, they said these marketing gurus don't understand organic growth. They just don't. They don't get it. They don't get your business. And lucky enough, I spoke to these coaches who had paid some of, close to that amount of money and had zero
Mm,
return and had
yeah.
very poor results. And for me, I look at it now and it's like, just put out heaps amount of value. Make sure you got a good product. You're good at your job. Be a good person, and I think you'll be able to sell some programs. And that's working. It's working to a certain degree. But when you're a father and you want to start freeing up some time, that becomes a bit dicey. And being able to delegate and let things go and know how to expand and grow, I think people get to this ceiling where they make decent money where it's okay, but then it's like,
Mm,
well, how do I really create financial freedom here where I can start stepping away from the business where money is just ticking over without me physically being there? And I think there's coaches that like myself and others who are kind of there at that point now, where that seems to be a big roadblock at the moment. And you know that's and going to that next step is it's a gray area because there's so many things that you need to do in order to set things up so it runs like a well-oiled machine. Um,
yeah.
and that's kind of something I'll talk to you about after this podcast. But I'm going to move on to the next question. I don't want to turn this into a bloody, one-on-one assessment.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, so with your BJJ, you've been doing that for 7 years.
Yeah.
Um, I train predominantly. I work with combat sport athletes, and I see that um, I think you injured your knee during grappling. I think you were saying that you had a
Twice.
minute twice.
Twice.
Tell us a little bit about that and how it happened.
Well, actually, the first one, um, it was I'd gone over to pick up my son in Tokyo. So I flew out there, and I started training in Tokyo. So I haven't seen friends at the gym there in man close to 5 years, 4.5 years. So I hit them up and I was like, hey, let's
What's
go
that?
roll.
Hmm.
So I think I got in. I was destroyed. I got in. Do you know Michael Leach? Don't hurt your back picking up that name I just dropped.
No.
Captain of Japan. Anyway,
Okay.
I flew in. I went to dinner with Leachy, like
Hmm.
off the plane. I was like out of it. Like I fell asleep on the train going to dinner. And then I got up the next day and I rolled. And I went decently hard because obviously, the second you step into a gym, there's a bunch of people that don't know me. They're like, who the fuck's this
Yeah.
guy? And they just fucking ramped it
You want to?
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was fine. So then I pick up my son and the next day in Tokyo airport, I squat down to tie my shoe. I stood up and everything in my knee just went. and I was like, that's not fucking good. But because I've got a 4-year-old and I'm about to get on a 14-hour flight, I was like, I'm going to deal with that when I get back to
Oh
America.
shit.
So I knew I'd done something. And I was like, fuck it. Like, I guessed it was a meniscus just because nobody tears their ACL tying their shoe. But I was
Mm.
like, well, maybe it's just going to be one of these things where, I can train around it and it's just cost of doing business. Because I know so many people have asymptomatic meniscus tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe for a week or two, I was training and I could feel it going like in my knee. And I was like, oh, this is not good. And then I remember one time I trained and it was a female white belt pushed me and I put my foot on the floor and I was like, nah, fucking done. And by the time I went in, had the scans in December, they were like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a bucket handle meniscus. So I couldn't straighten my leg.
Ah, fuck. Bucket
Yeah,
handle. You
yeah.
have to get
So that I
surgery.
had to have surgery, and I had surgery in January. They said
Mm-hmm.
we can sew it back, but you're going to be in a brace for 6 weeks. You're going to be out for 6 months, and you might tear it again, or we can just remove it and you'll have arthritis when you're older. And I was like, it sounds like a problem for future Kier. So
Just fucking remove
I
it.
cut it out because I had the wedding coming up. I got married the summer before, but we had the wedding in Vegas, and I was like, I'm not fucking getting married in a brace. So I had that surgery, and we can talk about that rehab. But basically,
Mm.
I came back 6 weeks later, trained for 2 weeks, and then a guy at my gym, he's a fucking moron. Every time we roll, I'd flog him. Like I'd tap him in like 30 seconds. And
Mm.
so we rolled that day. I tapped him in 30 seconds. I thought, I'm not going to be a dick. Like I'm just going to play off my back. So I went to
Oh.
bottom half guard, started playing, and he's like sat there. So I took my bottom leg and I set up a calf slicer.
Mm.
And because it's just a Friday afternoon casual training, I like sat back to set up a calf slicer and kicked as hard as he could against my knee. And I tore my LCL and I was out for another 3 months. So there was a 7 or 8 month period where I trained 1 month. And I came back in June or July.
Mm.
And one of the teenage blue belts I trained with, he's like, oh, because you look fat as fuck. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I have fucked a lady. And then, touch wood. I've been good since then. I got my purple belt 2 weeks ago. So,
Oh, congrats.
yeah.
So, did you do the LCL on the same leg?
Other knee. Other knee, yeah.
Other knee. Did you have?
Yeah.
Was it a complete rupture, or was it just a grade 2?
Well, it's funny enough, like the American medical system.
Or... Oh, mate, I've
Yeah,
heard.
well, here's the thing. When I did it, I was on another plane back to Tokyo 5 days later.
Oh
So
shit.
I couldn't fucking walk. The pain was that bad that it was keeping me awake in the hotel. Anyway, so I had to do that training.
Shit.
And then when I came back, I went to. This is the annoying thing when you've worked in sport, when you're a coach, when you have this career, you know what you've done.
Yeah.
So you call them up and say, I've torn my LCL, or I've torn a ligament on the outside of my knee, and say, oh, you need to see a doctor first. But that's another bill in America. So they
Mm.
make you jump through all these hoops. So I went to the physio and they said, yeah, well, you need to see a doctor. And I was like, do I have to? Yeah. Oh, we need to x-ray you. And I said, it's not broken. No,
Mm.
we need to do it. We need to rule it out before we order an MRI. So I paid for the visit and the x-ray.
How
And
much?
then I forget, but I paid for the knee surgery 10 grand. The physical therapy assistant comes in and says, we never surgically repair LCLs. And I was like, why not? And she said, it's just so rare that we would do it. We don't do it. And all we're going to do if we give you an MRI is tell you that your LCL is torn and we're not gonna repair it. And I was like, all right, I'll go fuck myself then. So I just rehabbed it myself again. Yeah.
So you didn't have the surgery on the LCL.
No,
So did the MRI come back and give you
they wouldn't give me one.
they wouldn't, so you just want to do, yeah,
Well,
because
I
I...
mean, you can obviously. Actually no. I don't think even privately you can't get an MRI in America without a referral from a specialist first. So
Mm.
they make you pay for the specialist and they make you pay for the MRI.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I know I've torn my LCL, and then I did go into the research a little bit and look at what are the recovery rates and all this kind of stuff. And
Did you go in a
I don't
brace for a
play.
bit?
No, no. I don't have a game as well where I'm going to be putting tons of pressure on the outside of my knee.
Yeah,
I'm not like one of these flexible guys
rubber
that plays
guard.
rubber guard and stuff
Yeah,
like that. I'm not going to do it. So I just kind of said, right,
rest.
I'm going to do my best to rehab it and see what happens. So yeah,
Did you modify your game, start wrestling on the feet a bit more as opposed to just getting in these vulnerable positions? Like I know I do more freestyle wrestling, and I know with BJJ,
yeah,
I find it really frustrating. I'm a bloody white belt in BJJ, and
yeah,
I find the positions are all end range, deep knee flexion, where you have to
yeah,
produce
yeah, yeah.
force, a lot of tibial rotation going on,
Especially
and
in nogi.
yes, a lot in no gi. Well, that's all I do, and then
Yeah,
it's different. Obviously, with freestyle wrestling, it's a lot more dynamic. The
yeah,
takedowns are where usually shit goes wrong,
yeah,
as opposed to these awkward positions. Now, we with I work a lot with guys with LCL tears, grade two tears. I got one guy. He's got no ACL, bucket handle tear in the meniscus, and he's back to rolling on the mats, and he's
yeah,
48 years old. So, I think it's just a case by case scenario and what people really want to go through. But it's interesting, like to feel the demands and looking at it from an outside perspective, you can
yeah,
see that you are. Especially with BJJP, I know why these guys get fucking knee injuries now after feeling it myself. Even
yeah,
if you are playing a decent game, even if you got butterfly hooks in and you're trying to elevate the guy, it's still that
yeah.
that end range knee
Well,
extension.
that's why Gordon Ryan. So it used to be not. I don't know how technical we're supposed to get for your audience, but like
No, it's
basically
so good.
a lot of their stuff they would elevate with butterfly hooks and then backstep to get into that saddle position for the leg locks. So that actually
Right.
requires you to put pressure on your LCL,
Mm,
and you get big guys on a bunch of steroids at 100 kilos plus fatigue. That's how he tore his knee.
mm,
So Lachlan Giles
yeah.
down in Melbourne,
He's got no
a lot of the
ACLs.
a lot of the K guard stuff is it allows you to get into those same entries without putting the pressure on your the outside of your knee, because you effectively like almost invert and slide your shin down the inside of their hip and step
Yeah.
over into it. And
Yeah.
if you look at like his run at ADCC in 2019,
Mm,
tons of K guard, and I do like K guard for that reason, because it can give you those entries and you don't have to be flexible or put yourself in risky positions.
in those, yeah. So are you more of a guard player, would you say, and
Oh
then
no,
switch
no.
more
It's
of a
funny. I think 20 years of rugby, you get used to. There are obviously differences, but it's like when you're just like a dumb white belt who's only ever played rugby, and you grab people, they're like, "Have you ever wrestled before?" And
yeah.
instinctively, you know how to take people down, but then there's obviously there's a lot more nuance that goes to takedown, standing takedown, stuff like that. And that's having a background as a strength coach and someone that's always lifted weights.
Mm-hmm.
Putting those things together, I'm definitely like more of a top game.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I like pressure passing. I play a lot of stuff from half guard. The difference is there's such a wrestling culture in America that,
Mm.
you know, I kind of tell people like, once I've got my hands on you, I'm okay. But all the shots, all the entries, stuff like that, I'm probably not that sophisticated by American standards. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually like to do a lot of wrestle ups, and
Yeah.
I like to use like a lot of like upper body entries. Like I'll try and get underhooks and just like chain
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I think it's one thing that you have to accept with jujitsu is that even at ADCC level, most of the submissions are coming from top position. So it's like that, rule number one, get on top. Oh, no, rule number one, be on top. Rule number two, stay on top. Rule number three, if you can't be on top, have a guard you shall not pass. Rule number four, see rule number one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare that the best guys are just constantly subbing guys off their back. If they play off their back, they're still sweeping to get to the top, and then they're going to sub guys. And you see it in MMA too. Like
Yep.
wrestlers tend to succeed for those reasons, because when you're the better wrestler, you get to decide where the fight happens, and you typically get to be the guy on top.
Pretty much you control the pace of where it
Exactly.
goes.
Yeah.
Now, I work with Corey Sanhagen, and we spoke a lot about this, and we talk
Yeah.
about you know he's like, every time I spar a wrestler and I throw a jab, they flinch, and I'm like, he's like, it takes years to build that timing, that reactivity
Yeah,
with striking as well. And people think that, you've got this fantastic wrestler going against a guy who's got an okay base of wrestling and a good high level skill demand of striking. And they think that this wrestler's always going to maul the striker. But
yeah,
it's not always the case, I guess. And you have to respect both arts in that sense with striking and wrestling. But you are seeing guys like Bo Nickel, who's a great example. I don't know if you know who Bo Nickel is.
oh
He
yeah,
was, yeah, he's now dominating in the MMA scene, and
hmm,
just how physical he is with that wrestling pedigree as a background. Um, with Now with your background, now with me as a coach, when I do the sport, every time I do a class, I avoid the spazzy guys in the gym always,
yeah,
as much as I can. Try to avoid the white belts and stuff. Now, when you look at the positions that you get into, um, I'm always analyzing it, going, "Fuck, I could blow my ACL out in that position, or I could do this, or I
yeah,
could do that," and it's constantly like I ended up blowing out my Achilles tendon in freestyle wrestling. So I
wow,
had surgery with that, and then that's what kind of sparked my passion for strength and conditioning for combat sports. And when you're in your 30s, like mid 30s, taking up a combat sport, it's
yeah,
probably not the smartest idea to go into one of freestyle wrestling, I guess. But freak accidents happen. um, with your experience now wrestling in America versus Tokyo, what are the differences between the actual how would I say this, not the style of grappling, but also just the energy, um, the level of obviously competition, and the way that they structure their training within the gym? Is there a big difference between the two countries? Because the Japanese have some great grappling pedigree. Obviously, the US
yeah.
has a big wrestling dominance. Do you guys start on the feet? Do you guys do a mix of both now, where you are doing a bit of freestyle wrestling as part of your warm up?
Yeah, well, you know, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons that go into this. I think one of the reasons that you, in my experience in Japan, you see a lot more of a guard based game, guys playing off their back, a lot more gi, spider guard, grips, judo, all that kind of stuff because they're all light, they're all small, they're
And
all doing
flexible.
judo from early days. I honestly think if you train with anyone over 85 kilos in Japan, they're either the big guy at their gym or they're an American on a base. It's literally. Then you look at the. It's a very traditional culture. It's a very collectivist culture. So nobody. They say the nail that sticks up gets hammered. In this
Hmm.
country, you got 300 million people trying to be that nail. In
Hmm.
Japan, it's considered a source of shame. There's that. They believe a lot in rote repetition, reps, reps, reps. Um, and again, I only trained a year in Tokyo, so you do have to take it with a pinch of salt. But that's
Hmm.
certainly the approach in rugby as well. Obviously, when you come over to America, I'll tell you the exact moment that I realized I needed to wrestle more. I was in a competition against a former collegiate wrestler, and I was
Oh.
upside down. he fireman tossed me, and as I was upside down, I was like, "Fuck." So
Yeah.
after that day, I was like, right, I need to learn how to wrestle more. So
Yeah.
I'm balancing family, work, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm
Yeah.
not an expert by any means, but
Yeah.
um, I am more confident on my feet now. And
Hmm.
if you put me against another like average sloppy middle aged guy, like I can wrestle okay. If you put me against an ex collegiate wrestler, I'm gonna
Yeah.
struggle.
Fucking oath.
Um, in terms of the structure, I think again, I've done more over here, but the Americans I do think tend to be a little bit more open minded because there is one, they have the the wrestling culture within college. There's a lot more competition.
Hmm.
They have the melting pot of MMA and jiu-jitsu and judo and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I just think in general, I don't want to throw them all on the bus, but I do think Americans are a little bit more open-minded.
Yep.
So, for example, there's a gym in Maryland where they are proudly the we don't drill gym. Everything is games based, like Kit Dale, if you're familiar with him,
Yeah.
Australian guy.
Kid,
Yeah,
I think he had a seminar here.
Yeah, similar approach. So
Yeah.
everything is, constraints led approach, um, implicit learning, guided discovery, all that kind of stuff. And they basically just let their athletes learn through games. You will never find that in Japan. Um, Specific to my gym, we do a bunch of that. We do a lot of positional rounds. That's,
Yeah.
I think John Danaher is one of the smartest coaches in sport, period.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his things is basically that victory is assured if you can't lose. And one of the most demoralizing things you can do to an opponent is to let them throw their absolute best at you and you just fucking like shrug it off. So he calls it like the end game. In chess, it's the end game. So
Yeah.
things like late escapes, worst case scenarios, bad positions, positional rounds. If you train those for dedicated rounds, you're probably going to accumulate, more reps in late armbar escapes or more reps in, escape from side control
Mm-hmm.
than most people would ever see if you just let them roll, especially if they're the good person at their gym.
Yeah.
Um, so the advanced classes at our gym, we do 1 day of lapel. So we do, things like worm guard, squid guard, lapel chokes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Tuesdays are wrestle day. Wednesdays is leg lock day. Thursdays is takedown day. Fridays a free day. And then we just do regular classes and open mat Saturday, Sunday.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a
So
good
fairly,
structure.
fairly balanced curriculum.
Yeah, that's really good structure.
Interestingly enough, the head instructor is an elementary school teacher. So he's been teaching for 20 plus years, and he's actually one of the best sport coach instructors I've ever encountered because he implicitly
Funny you
understands
say
how
that,
people
man.
learn.
It's funny
Yeah,
you say that. Like anyone with like a just a school teaching background that has gotten into coaching in another sport,
yeah,
they're amazing coaches. They're good
yeah,
communicators, and they know how to just actually teach a skill to the lowest common denominator, which is great.
yeah.
Now, going back to your rehab is something I'm really interested in. How did you rehab your knee? What was what were the early stages to mid stages, obviously to where you are now? Before we get into that, how is your knee feeling right now? You feel like 100%?
Yeah, I mean, I have joint pain and stuff like that, but I just think it's, I'm 38. I've been crashing into things since I was 10. And,
Yeah,
I do jujitsu for a hobby. Like, there's just miles on the clock. In terms of like knee pain, I'm pretty good.
yeah.
I have had to modify my training, but yeah, I'd say I'm fully healed. In terms of my rehab, I think it's actually still up on the internet. You could probably go check it out. What got me hired at William and Mary was a presentation on return to play because it
Wow.
was it was so terrible at University of Richmond. I basically just did one of these to the head athletic trainer to show him how it should be done. To give you an
Talk
example, we
talk
had a bunch.
talk
I'm
to us
sorry, go
about
on.
that. Sorry, talk
Okay,
to us
so
about
we had
that.
a bunch of guys. We had a bunch of guys at U of R who constantly getting hamstring tears. So I'm like, okay, that thing that we keep breaking our guys doing. Why don't we become masters of that thing so that it doesn't break them anymore? So if you look at someone like Jonas Tawiododu, he'd have guys doing
Mm,
dribbles and marches the day after a grade one. So I'm like, basic march progressions. Once you can get into like A switches, A runs, an A run, if you just speed it up enough, turns into running. So you get
mm,
that kind of seamless progression.
yeah.
And I had a head athletic trainer walk onto the field and give me one of these. Stop. This is reckless. All this kind of stuff. And then they went back into the physio room to do Swiss ball curls and band clamshells. So
Ah,
anyway, a lot of the my belief about what should be done went into that presentation. And
mhm,
basically, I think that everything lies on a continuum. So there are different activities that athletes have to perform where there's the worst stress possible imaginable on one end, and there is the easiest activity possible imaginable on the other end. And all
mhm,
athletes exist somewhere on that spectrum.
mhm,
And the job of the practitioner is to move them from where they are now to as far as possible along that spectrum as they can be, because by definition, all uh, injuries, soft
mhm,
tissue or non-soft tissue included, occur when the demands of the environment exceed the capacity of the organism at the global level or at the tissue level. When somebody, stands on your leg and it snaps, guess what? Environmental demand exceeded capacity.
mhm.
Can you do anything about those injuries? No, you can't. When it comes to soft tissue injuries, though, absolutely, yes, you can. You can
Mm-hmm.
manage the environment more intelligently, both acutely and chronically,
Mm-hmm.
and you can also increase the capacity of the organism to resist environmental stress, also
Mm-hmm.
known as training.
Mm-hmm.
So
General physical.
there are all these different activities,
Mm-hmm.
and you just have to look at what are the variables that tend to increase the incidence of injury or the risk or the stress that the organism is placed under.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically for all of them: speed, load, I would say metabolic stress, cognitive emotional stress, metabolic fatigue, and contact impact.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we would do it is we would have a stream for linear running, change of direction, grappling, jumping and landing. Then we had a strength stream, and you can break strength into horizontal push pull, vertical push pull,
Mm-hmm.
bending, twisting, hinging, squatting, lunging, all this different kind of stuff. And we also had streams in there for jumping, throwing, and projecting. So basically, like heavy stuff.
Yep.
And we would just look at, what does it look like when we do these things? And the answer, of course, is that most of the weight room stuff doesn't get close to the most risky stuff that you see on the field. It tends to
No.
be full speed, full contact, under fatigue, high levels of emotional stress, high levels of distraction, uh, low constraints on practice.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to use me as an example as a grappler, the last thing I should be doing when I come back is going straight back into a level 4 class where you roll for an hour back to back against people that are a lot better than you. Because when you're a
Yep.
blue belt, you're the bottom belt in the class. So for me, I just went through that process, and there are
Yep.
things that have to be checked off. So for example, we used to, what do we call it, the 4Ps at William and Mary? So it was like protect. So you have to protect wound healing, you have to protect the joint, all that kind of stuff. Then you have to prepare. So
Mm-hmm.
then you have to earn the right to use heavier loads in training. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
speed, strength, power is the foundation of repeat speed, strength, and power, which is the riskiest thing you can do. But if
Yep.
you've lost a ton of muscle mass, you have arthrogenic inhibition, you don't have good control, all that kind of stuff, well, you need to check that box before you earn the right to do so.
Yep.
Then you would have the power phase. So
Mm-hmm.
that is basically maximization of general outputs: speed, strength, power, and so on. One for their own sake, and two for the ability that having speed predicts repeat speed in absolute terms, like
Right.
power predicts repeat power in absolute terms. And then we would just take that and we would transmute that into repeat outputs under fatigue. So that would be the perform. So that would be protect, prepare, power, perform.
Mm-hmm.
So in the protect phase, I was like, right, can I walk? So the day after my surgery, I walked to the car shop, dropped my car off, went and got a coffee, walking around.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was like, okay, can I get that basic control without hurting the wound healing? So I was doing
Mm-hmm.
terminal knee extensions, I think 2 days after surgery,
Yep.
like tiny little terminal knee extensions and just progressing range.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would do some occluded stuff to try and get back muscle mass. I would
Mm-hmm.
measure muscle girths. Once I did that, I would look at just reintroducing some basic resistance training, getting a little bit stronger, and then obviously increasing the speed
Yep.
with some power stuff, some jumping, some projection or ballistic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously with that comes impact.
Mm-hmm.
And then just starting to push the envelope a little bit in terms of the repeat outputs, and then the whole time you're basically doing that parallel with sport. So the variables that I just described to you, you can use to manipulate sport practice as well. So for example,
Definitely. You put constraints in
solo
place.
skills solo skills is the lowest risk because it's really really hard to hurt yourself when it's just you and you're operating at low speed. So for example, um, shrimping, different calisthenics, crawls, and so on.
Yep.
You're starting to move through the ranges and in the directions that are necessary to prepare you for grappling, but you might not see in the gym.
Exactly.
To then, I call it like unopposed drilling. So maybe like pummeling, just getting different entries, stuff like that. Maybe some carries, some partner stuff
Mm-hmm.
into a little bit of like semi-resisted drilling. So I actually think that's where the learning is done, because unopposed drilling doesn't give you the context or the problem solving and the resistance, but then open sparring doesn't give you the exposure and the reps. So I actually
Yep.
like those kind of like situational positional drills where you just get a good look from your partner to tweak it and adapt it and modify it.
Yeah.
And then I would say after that, you have stuff like, um, flow roles, situational roles, and
Hmm.
then getting into like live sparring, and then just shark
Back
tanks and getting blown
murdered.
out. Yeah,
Back at it again. No, that's a great way to put it, and it's pretty much like a very similar system to what I would use, rehabbing my guys as well. But it's good to actually have some form of framework, or you need that when you are returning to sport. And
yeah,
people will always say, you've got to have flexible training approaches, but when you are trying to get back to a sport, and it's a whole different thing. Majority of people that I do work with are broken, and they
yeah.
all take part in combat sports. So we're always just trying to make them feel good so they can continue doing what they love doing. And that process is a great way to put it, is the way that you simulate returning to sport, where you use a lesser degree, where you don't have force going against force. You've just got yourself getting familiar with the environment again, of you actually
Hmm.
being on the mats with your shoes off, moving your body around through different ranges of motion and exposure that you're not going to get in the weight room, which is really important, which I think most combat sport athletes need, instead of just going straight back into sparring full on. But yeah, it's easier said than done when no one wants to listen, which is the
Well,
hard
that is
part.
that is one of the useful things of having a framework too, because if you read Anti-Fragile, oh no,
Yes.
it was
Is it Rob Gray you're talking about? You
no,
mentioned a
no,
lot.
that's Nassim Taleb, but he talks
Yeah.
about basically as a full by randomness. So he
Mm,
talks it's applied to finance, which is everybody knows why recessions happen.
hmm
Everybody knows why people go bust. We've known it's basically when you spend too much money and you don't save enough, or you make risky decisions and you make bets where it's too risky. So why does it happen? Because it's
hmm
one thing to say, fuck, look at that guy, what an idiot, when it's you and your emotions are running high and you put that pressure on yourself and oh, it's different this time, it doesn't apply to me. That's when you
mm,
come amok. So having the framework, the criteria, it's like, no, you've not done this. You have not earned the right to do so. You need to
yeah.
check this off, and have somebody wave it in your face in particular.
Yeah.
That is actually, in my opinion, a lot of the value in a system like that. The
Yeah.
reason that your approach and my approach is similar is because we intuitively know it makes common sense and that's what works.
Yeah.
But it's another thing when you're working with a sport coach, or you have an assistant, or you have an athlete, you want to be able to refer back to that document and say, nah, this is what we're going to do.
Definitely. Now, this is a totally different question. How are you investing these days? Are you investing your money at the moment?
So, not financial advice, not a money expert. I'll just tell you what I do.
Hmm.
Um, I think that online business, working for yourself, like we've alluded to, it's great in that you get to drive the growth of that and you get to make good amounts of money for yourself. I believe that if you stick with it long enough and you learn as you go along, you're going to make more working for yourself than you will working for somebody else, especially in team sport. The problem is that it's very involved. It requires a lot of time and energy, and if we fast forward 30 years, I'm going to be almost 70 in 30 years. Am I going to be doling out fitness advice on the internet when I'm 70? Because
No,
the first
imagine.
bite is with the eye. People look at me and be like, who the fuck's this guy? Like, no.
Fucking David Weck.
So, on the other hand, I think there are things that I can put my money into that are less involved, less time demanding, but easier to manage. And what I try and do is I try and make the money in the fast thing that I can drive, and then move it into other stuff that I can kind of not set and forget it, but it's going to be more stable. So, for example, what I'm alluding to is real estate.
Yeah.
I have 6 apartments right now. I just put an offer in to buy 13. So there's a useful thing in America called a 1031 exchange, which is when you sell a property in America, um, if you immediately roll the profits of that over into a new, bigger building with a bigger mortgage, you do not pay any capital gains on that property.
Fuck, you are
So
kidding
if
me.
you were to sell $1 million house,
And you make,
let's
say
say
you,
you profit $1 million,
yeah,
you're going to pay 200 grand capital gains, long-term capital gains on that house if you get taxed. But if
yeah,
you roll it over, that 200 now gets you an extra 800 on the subsequent mortgage. So
mm,
using those 1031s is a really good way to just keep rolling your money over and to not pay tax. And then there's an additional rule in America where if you're a real estate professional,
mm-hmm.
any unrealized losses on properties that you own actually becomes a tax deduction. So, for example, if I own $1 million of real estate and it depreciates, let me think, 27, 100 grand. Let's say it depreciates by 100 grand. I start my taxes 100 grand in the hole. So I have to earn 100 grand before I start getting taxed, even though
Oh my
I've just
God,
sat
that's
there being a real estate
amazing.
professional with a bunch of property, stuff like that. So I think, for
We'd be,
me, my personal goal is to have 50 apartments, just because I've worked out that if I make 250 bucks a month per unit, that is going to add up to $150,000 a year, and I think that's like a good burn rate for me, my wife, and my son. So you mentioned financial freedom earlier. I do not consider myself to be financially free. I think I will be much, much closer to being financially free when I have 50 apartments. So that was one of the motivators in terms of selling Strength Coach Network, was to be like, okay, well, I want to take some money off the table and put it into stuff like that. And fingers crossed, I get this deal with 13 apartments, because I think that's what I do like about real estate, is it's multiplicative. You can multiply it
mm,
because every dollar that you put down, you get four times that in terms of the mortgage.
it's
So
compounding interest with,
it is, yeah,
yeah. So the that's funny the way that they structure that in America. If we had those laws here in Australia, we'd be
yeah,
rich. Like I've got a commercial property at the moment now,
yeah.
but we could lease one property for, well, my one at the moment where it's located, it's only small, but potentially close to $60,000 a year just off one commercial property. But
Yeah.
you know, to actually buy a property like that would cost you $900,000 to get that return. To,
Sydney's outrageous,
it's
outrageous. I used to live in Rose Bay.
no, oh mate, that's one of the richest suburbs
Yeah, yeah.
in Sydney.
I used to what's that? Is it Watson's Bay? I
Yeah,
used to go at
yeah,
the Watson's Bay Hotel.
yeah, yeah,
Gorgeous.
yeah.
Yeah, passport clues and yeah.
It's beautiful. But I mean, reason being, I used to work in a finance district with,
Mm,
in the CBD there, and I came across a lot of guys who were very high up in finance, and I'd always pick their brains. I was fascinated with it, and I wanted to know how they made their money and things like that, and obviously shares and property and businesses. And one thing my old man told me was, you're never gonna get rich off your wage. You're never gonna get rich off, unless you're making copious amounts of money off your wage. But it's what you do with that money, obviously, to get you the return. Property in I've just moved to the Gold Coast. Property here now is like Sydney. Like
yeah,
to get a house on the beach, it's like $6 million to get anything on the beach. It's crazy. But
yeah.
so you think real estate? Obviously, I don't know much about any other businesses to invest in. I know real estate is safe, and I don't know what it's like in America. But $250 a month in rent in America, what's that like?
Oh no, cash flow, cash flow.
Oh, as in just cash flow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's
that's
off
like when
each property.
everything's said and done. Yeah. No, like I have for sure real estate is cheaper. Um, just because there's nothing but space in America, and obviously you have that stat about Australia where 98% of the people live in 2% of the land, but I think there's a lot more livable space in America.
Yes,
Um, so I remember when I came over, I had money saved up from Japan. I couldn't get a mortgage. I just bought a house for cash. It was maybe 105 grand, but I bought it for cash. You're
wow,
not going to find a house for that in the UK or Sydney or wherever. So, just give you an idea. It for sure helps that you have, a market that was going up. I made like a 50% profit on that in 2 or 3 years.
that's awesome.
Um, but then what I do like as well is that you can force appreciation with real estate. So, um, people talk about this burst strategy. So it's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And I do think that the days of being able to do that are gone, just because when
Mm.
you add 5% to the basis, the base mortgage, the base mortgage rate, it gets way more expensive to borrow. You can buy less for your money. It's much harder to justify valuations when things aren't going up, so you can take more money out. So
Mm.
what I've tried to do is basically just buy something. I try and buy the shittest house on the nicest street that I can afford.
That's a good
And
way
what
to
I
do
try
it.
to do is I try to look for something where when I buy it, it's cash flowing. So I think what speculators do is they buy something that loses money and then they try and pump money into it to bring it up, and then you get it rented or flip it and sell it. I
Mm.
try and get something where there's still plenty of room to value add, um, but it's cash flowing from day one or breaking even, and then I'll put money into it. So I have a quad, which is 4 units. I bought it for 405,000.
Fuck.
I put 100 down. I put another 100 plus into doing it up. But right now it's on the market for 705, and it had 6 viewings today. So I'll probably profit. I mean, before the commissions, 200 grand.
With
Yeah.
if you were to rent, what if you were to keep them and just rent every single one of them out?
I have done that. So I think when I first moved in there, it was brutal. I had one that basically they gave me fraudulent rent rolls when I moved in. So they committed fraud
Oh,
against me. They said, yeah, current in rent. I think they missed 1 month in one unit had missed 1 month in the previous year. I bought the place. There was one unit that hadn't paid rent since they moved in
how do they get
pre-COVID.
away with this? Is there no real
Fraud,
estate agent
fraud.
or?
There
Yeah.
was another one who it turned out that she'd been evicted 9 times in 12 years. So it cost me
Fuck.
25 grand to take her to court and get her out. It took 18 months. Um, so anyway, that was tough, but I got both of them out
Shit.
eventually. I remodeled the units, and then the other two I just moved on and remodeled. So I think the average rent was $700 when I bought the place. It's now close to 1,500. So I take out every month maybe 2.5 grand in profit. But I know that I can make enough working for myself to
Mm.
sell that place and just keep rolling over, because like I said, it's one of these things where it does compound. So let's say if I think back of the envelope that I'm going to leave this deal with maybe 350, and then I'm going to put it into this building that's going to be 800,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's basically like a 50% loan to value.
Mm-hmm.
They'll give you credit in your equity as long as you dropped, I think it's like 25%. So there's probably 150K that I can use as a line of credit in that house once I bought it to fix that up, push up the rent. You
Mm.
know, it,
It it
not to be
works.
nasty, but like basically give people the opportunity to rent at the new price, or say, hey, your lease is up,
Yeah.
like, and then just churn it over like that. And then I think, looking at the sums this year, I reckon there's at least another $1 million of value that I can put in that property. And when I sell it, the next one maybe 3 million, and
Mm.
just I'm going to keep doing that.
Just
Hopefully,
just keep rolling it
hopefully,
over.
yeah,
I just think the way that it's structured there in the US, that the way you're doing it is probably the best way to do it. Where obviously here in Australia, if you can pay it off fast and live off the rent, and that's your retirement fund,
yeah,
and if you've got two or three commercial properties that are giving you 150 grand a year to live off, all up, I think that would be ideal. But to pay those things down, you know, it's
yeah,
you got to have a good high paying job to
yeah.
pay them down as fast as
I
possible.
really do think it's a cliche, but America is the land of opportunity. I love this country. Um, there's nobody that would give an immigrant, a fat bank loan. I haven't been in the country for 2 or 3 years to be like, oh yeah, go buy fucking
That's
fourplex and fix it up.
mate. That's crazy. I can't even get a loan now, and I've got a
Yeah,
property. Like, it's
yeah,
insane.
yeah,
But even the way the world's going, they're still lending money as is. Like it's not like a big deal
yeah.
or anything.
It's. I do think that America as a culture, it's true. Wealth inequality here is bad. This is a terrible country to be poor. It's a terrible country to be on the bottom rung of society. But then by taking away the safety net, you also take away the ceiling. There is
Mm,
no limit to how rich you can be in America, and you just have to accept that that's the downside that comes with the upside in this country.
definitely. Look, Kier, I think we're going to wrap it up there, man. Thank you
Yeah,
for
cool.
jumping on and giving up your time. I know it's late there, man. I'm sorry to keep you up so late.
Ah, pleasure. Yeah,
Yeah,
no
but
problem.
mate, um, guys, where can everyone find you? Where's the best place?
Callmekeir.com. So callmekeir, Keir.com. You can just go to the homepage and you can see everything there. And if you want to learn about the course in particular, they can just go callmekeir.com/squeeze page.
Awesome. Are you releasing anything new in the new year or anything like that?
I think in the new year, like once we get everything sorted, yeah, I'm going to drop another level of the course, and yeah, we'll see.
Awesome, man. Thanks for jumping on, and I look forward to that course.
Pleasure, man. Thank you.